This is Bloomberg Daybreak Middle East and Africa. Our top stories this morning. Asian stocks follow the tech-fueled rally on Wall Street as investors focus on earnings as a major test of the equities bull run. Tesla surges post-market on its promise of making cheaper cars sooner. And the Senate passes a long-delayed $95 billion emergency aid package for Ukraine and other U.S. allies. Arms shipments to Kyiv expected to resume within days. It's just gone 8 a.m. across the Emirates. I'm Vonnie Quinn in Dubai, and let's see how we're shaping up for a Wednesday session. We are now well into earnings season, and you can see from how futures are reacting that they're going down pretty well. We've had 2 days now of gains for the S&P 500. Yesterday it was a 1% gain, a 1.2% gain for the Nasdaq, even though earnings were mixed. It's a really fascinating story. I want to show you the two-year yield. We're down another couple of bips. A well-received auction yesterday, 492.69, and we are holding on to gains in Brent. This after the API came out and said that stockpiles were really pretty healthy, maybe more than people were expecting. I do want to point out that Citigroup is saying that this pullback in equities that we saw over the last couple of weeks could be attractive because it's taken the froth off the top. And to that end, let's have a look at this chart because it does show the RSI of the S&P 500. Will we bounce off that 30 mark again? We'll have to see. It might take a couple of tries before we do. Well, let's check in now on that session in Asia. It was an up session for the most part. Avril Hong is in our Singapore studio. Avril.
Yeah, Vonnie, we're seeing a lot of green on the screen today. You know how tech stocks got that beating at the later part of last week. But today, infotech sector, that's really got its groove on. It's outperforming on the benchmark for Asia stocks. We're seeing South Korea, Japan, Taiwan gauges, convincing moves to the upside compared to the past two sessions. Hang Seng also in the green, and this is an index that has since erased its declines for the year. Let's take a closer look at what we're seeing in the movers because the chip stocks are also higher today thanks to Texas Instruments. It's seen as a bellwether for the sector. It came through with a solid forecast that's helping to lift some of the South Korea and the Japanese chip-making related stocks. This one getting a double tailwind as a Tesla supplier as well. We're also seeing the climb in some of Tesla's peers such as XPeng listed in Hong Kong. Vonnie.
Some climb there. Avril, thank you so much. That's Avril Hong in Singapore. So continuing now with Tesla, which says it's accelerating the launch of more affordable models after a decline in its profit margins and sales. The EV pioneer said it aims to start production of new models as soon as this year. For more, Robert Lee, our senior analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence, joins us. So, Robert, how did the earnings call help alleviate investor concerns, many of which actually came true in the earnings themselves?
Yes, that absolutely. But given the underperformance of the stock, arguably a lot of that was priced in ahead. And it's always, obviously, the market looks ahead and it's about what changes incrementally versus what we expected or what the market expected. So on that front, I think we got more clarity on the strategic direction of the company, although the details are perhaps lacking. So whilst there had been concerns that the company was shifting and focusing more on the potential long-term opportunities in robo-taxis, Elon Musk was clear that they're going to refocus again on the main market, the mass market, and go for this low-priced EV that should not only will give them new strategic direction on that front, but they also pulled forward the potential launch date on that from the second half of next year into the first half of this year. So on that front, there were two incremental positives.
So how does that change the earnings outlook now going forward, Robert?
Okay, well, again, the mass market potential is obviously significant. However, it's a hyper-competitive market, and also, economic growth on a global basis is clearly slowing. So those are two potential headwinds. But having said that, if they are successful on the mass market, it could open up new geographical markets for them. And, open up a wider market opportunity for them in the long run. I think the second thing, just briefly, is on their Cybertruck, which is this very futuristic-looking, low-volume vehicle that they've been ramping up. They're accelerating the production on that front, which possibly could mean that business makes break-even by the end of this year. So, again, that was another incremental positive that came through, and the market obviously reacted positively to that, given the context of very low expectations going into these results.
Robert, can Musk revive sales without China? And to that end, we know that China cars are going to be sold at something like a $46,000 price point. Can they be sold at that price point in China, where a BYD and others are coming in now to meet the demand?
Yeah, well, I guess take a step back. Tesla is a premium brand. They had market leadership and, definitely leadership over the mainstream automotive companies. But that is quickly being eroded. And ultimately, the car industry is a volume industry. And whilst Tesla does produce at high volume at the moment, you have got very aggressive companies like BYD and Li Auto with the full backing of central government and the state of China behind there. So I think that's the major risk that Tesla faces in the long run if they are going to be successful within the mass markets. Because clearly these Chinese companies with the various subsidies and scale advantages that they have are going to give, are going to be a very potent threat, I think, to Tesla for the foreseeable future.
Robert, thank you so much for joining. That is Robert Lee, our senior analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Let's bring in now Faisal Hassan, who is CIO and head of asset management at Al Mal Capital, for a broader look at the markets. So, Faisal, it's obviously been a pretty turbulent couple of weeks, but the VIX, I was noticing, is back down now to under 16. We still have the S&P 500 below 5,100. What's the outlook from here?
I think still we believe that the sector sort of leaders that have performed in the last 2 to 3 months, which is energy, materials, and to some extent financials, I think they will continue to lead. I'm not that much bullish on the tech part as of now. We'll have to see the earnings. Yes, we saw the recent earnings. That was good from the bellwether stocks. But let's see whether there is a kind of a momentum, sort of a downward trends in the tech stock. And I think much more needs to be seen from the corporate earnings and the expectations. So the results from the Tesla that we saw, I think market is all about expectations. So that's what is going to be the trend from now on.
Well, the end of last week in particular was a good reminder to investors that a lot of wealth can be destroyed very, very fast with that 10% drop for NVIDIA, which has now obviously retraced some of those declines. But more broadly, we also saw a little bit of weakening in US economic data, with business activity coming in a little lower and a contraction for the manufacturing PMI. Does that concern you at all, or perhaps maybe it enthuses you because it gives the Fed more of a green light?
I think still we need to see much more data points on the inflation, because we are seeing still, and on the 26th we will see the Fed's preferred indicator, which is the PCE, come out, and let's see how that goes. But overall, I think U.S. economy is in a good shape, and I think we are more going towards the camp that probably rates for higher is giving more money in terms of the bondholders, the generation, and that they are spending. So I think U.S. economic growth seems to be going strong. Again, it will be data dependent, and see how that, because that labor market is going to dictate how that growth is going to be.
It's fascinating because with all of this, we've had a stronger US dollar, and that strength is still there, and emerging market currencies have really been hurting recently. I mean, we're off our, extreme points, but still, you like emerging market local currency debt. Explain why.
I think from the interest rates perspective, I think these guys have got the financial flexibility to ease much more and much faster. And then, according to me, I think much of the emerging markets, especially on the Southeast Asia, some of the currencies are undervalued from 10 to 15%, and that gives the local currency bonds an edge, where it gives a good yield plus the appreciation from the currency perspective.
Assuming that the currency appreciates, right? I mean, does that not depend on what the Fed does and when it does it, and how these other central banks can respond?
Of course, and if you look at the developed market central banks, like, yes, we have seen that now that there is a delay in the Fed's action that is expected, and we expect probably the rate cut, if it happens this year, probably will happen in the fourth quarter, as compared to our expectations in the third quarter, and the 3 rate cuts, probably it might be 2 or probably 1 this year. So that changes. And from the other developed market perspective, I think probably ECB and Bank of England might cut the rates sooner than the Fed, because the inflationary stance there is due to different segments. So I think yes, probably in that case, emerging markets will ease much more faster than the Fed.
So what else are you liking at the moment? Because if everything has been pushed back to the fourth quarter in terms of what the Fed does, is there anything you can do in the meantime to take advantage of that situation?
I think from again on the developed market side, Japan looks good, and in terms of their what you call shareholders-friendly reforms that we have seen from the valuation perspective. In the monetary policy, the central bank has taken the first step, and we have to see how that goes. So Japanese equities still look better, and I think we should start looking at China again, because we saw a lot of pivot from China to India, but I think China still has much more firepower within themselves in order to prop up the economy, but we'll still have to see how does the shadow banking and the real estate sector performs there.
The problem with China is that we've been saying this for a long time, right? Since the opening, in fact, really. I mean, a lot longer than that, but just most recently. And it feels like investors just aren't buying the China story yet. Where would you go if you were looking at China?
I think more on the energy and materials again, because overall I think energy market is becoming strong again, and that has helped. And even on the financial side, some of the China A stocks looks on the valuation side. But again, we'll have to look at overall the economic data and the kind of efforts the regulators and the Chinese authorities put in order to improve the market.
You're obviously in local currency debt in lots of emerging markets. Where do you see yields in the US headed in the shorter term?
I think we are looking at we are more bullish on the high yield space in the US, and I think probably the yields will now remain range bound, but in the high yield space we are looking at a short end of the curve, because then you can get a yield of around 7-8% on the high yield, and without taking too much credit risk. So I think the yields will remain range bound, but whether on the 10-year will it reach, let's say, 4.8, 4.9, maybe.
How much in cash are you?
We are from the asset allocation perspective, yes, we are on cash because the cash is yielding, but now I think it's more going towards the equities and on the high yield side.
Right. We have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time and insights today. That's Faisal Hassan, CIO and Head of Asset Management at Al Mal Capital. Still ahead, we speak exclusively to Spinny's CEO, Sunil Kumar, about their $375 million IPO in Dubai. But first, the US Senate finally passing $95 billion of emergency aid for Ukraine after a long delay. Details next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Middle East and Africa. I'm Bonnie Quinn in Dubai. The US Senate has passed a long-delayed $95 billion emergency aid package for Ukraine and other allies, Israel and Taiwan. The bill, which won sweeping partisan approval, now awaits President Biden's signature. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg's senior Asia editor, Bill Faries. So, Bill, how quickly can military aid start flowing, and what impact might it have?
Well, according to the White House and the Pentagon, they have been pre-preparing for this situation, and that they say the military aid will start flowing within days. I think it may take a little bit longer to get to some of the frontline areas. But you asked the really big question in terms of, what kind of an impact it will have. That really remains to be seen. Russia has had a little bit of an advantage as Ukraine has had to ration more of its artillery and air defense weaponry around the battlefield. Whether they can reverse that trend and start to make more progress against Russia is a real big question. At the very least, they're saying this allows them to hold their ground against what has seemed to be a very modest Russian advance in recent months.
And of course, as part of all of this, we also saw a measure on TikTok. What are the next steps on TikTok on the ban now that the measure in the bill has passed?
Right. As soon as it goes to the White House, President Biden says he would sign it along with the military aid that we just mentioned. And I would expect that at some courthouse, federal courthouse, TikTok's lawyers are going to be there a moments later to try to file an injunction against that being carried out. They have promised a series of lawsuits. They have tried to get some of their biggest users on the app and some of the many people who derive their income from that app to file lawsuits as well. It's going to be tied up in the courts for quite a while. The legislation, as it passed, gives TikTok or ByteDance a year to divest itself from TikTok. But I think the legal challenges could eat up most of that time and push that one-year deadline out further into the future.
So people could still use it on their phones for now, at least. Bill, thank you so much. That's Bloomberg Senior Asia Editor Bill Farry's joining us there. ByteDance says it has handed in an overdue document assessing potential risks to minors from its TikTok Lite service. This comes a day after EU regulators threatened it with fines and a partial ban. They claim the app includes a reward system for users that could be addictive to young people and that full risk assessment was late. Plenty more still ahead. Do stay with us. This is Bloomberg Middle East and Africa. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Middle East and Africa. I'm Vonnie Quinn in Dubai. The list of problems facing Boeing continues to grow. The latest, a union representing employees says the plane maker retaliated against two engineers who raised concerns about its jets in 2022. The U.S. aircraft maker's shares are down 35% so far this year as it prepares to report earnings. Asia transport reporter Danny Lee joins us now. So, Danny, how much will the Alaska Air impact weigh on first quarter results?
Yeah, I mean, this mid-January, this mid-air accident that took place really will define its earnings performance. And let's just go back to what happened, this mid-air accident on a brand new Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. What that led to was US regulators zeroing in on Boeing's manufacturing practices and its focus on quality. And as a result, Boeing's production on its cash cow 737 MAX was capped at 38 planes a month. That deprives Boeing of revenue, deprives Boeing of much needed cash, and ultimately what we saw in this first quarter was deliveries of new jets falling to its lowest since mid-2021. And so therefore it has a real material impact on its ability to deliver the targets, the financial targets that the financial community expects. And so therefore it's little wonder why its share price is down 35%. But one of the things we'll try to get a sense of from Boeing is how it's trying to move forward and potentially whether it can give some form of guidance for the full year, which it has yet to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been one crisis after another. Boeing also obviously cleaning house and trying to move forward. What's the latest on its overhaul, Danny?
Yeah, and so what we did see as part of this fallout from Alaska Air was management, Boeing management deciding to step away. We've got the chairman saying he would leave, step down, and we've got the CEO who will be out of the door by the end of the year, and the replacement that is still yet to be found. But critically, who wants to take over at the hot seat and the CEO hot seat at Boeing? And really it'll be a battle between those who want to see someone who can restore Boeing's quality in manufacturing and also to help reward the financial performance, but also that of unions, for example, who want to see someone who's got an engineering background, someone who understands the literal nuts and bolts of building the aircraft and therefore building back on Boeing's reputation. And so that's still yet to be seen and how that plays out. And then also just Boeing trying to solve one of the other crises in its production is buying back Spirit Aerosystems, a key supplier on the 737 MAX and other aircraft, but really to try and take back control. That we reported in Bloomberg News yesterday that Boeing is facing a bit of a slowdown in talks and taking that over, disagreements on pricing, and also the fact that its arch rival Airbus is also in parallel talks to buy back part of Spirit Aerosystems as well.
It's amazing because it's such an exciting space at the moment and Boeing really just can't participate. Asia Transport reporter Danny Lee. Well, let's get to some other stories we are watching this morning. Kering has warned that profit will plunge in the first half of the year after wealthy shoppers curbed spending on Gucci products. Comparable sales at Gucci tumbled 18% in the first quarter on tepid demand out of China. As a result, Kering sees recurring operating income dropping to 45% for the first half. Gucci accounts for more than two-thirds of Kering's operating profit. And Prada earnings are set to hit the wires today. It's expected to report higher revenue growth in the first quarter on higher product prices and stronger demand from buyers in its Asia-Pacific markets. Bloomberg Intelligence thinks the company will retain the ability to raise prices and drive profit for the midterm. Let's take a look at how Middle East markets fared in the Tuesday session. We had the Tadawul All-Share Index up about 0.5%. Aqua Power contributing most to that gain, increasing 4.3%. As you can see, we are looking at the DSM Qatar Index up about 0.5% as well. That was after 3 down days. Qatar National Bank contributing most to that particular gain there. As for the rest of the indices, the DFM General and the ADX General, they were down. I mean, fairly marginally, but still Abu Dhabi down now at the lowest closing level in at least a year. First Abu Dhabi Bank was responsible for that for the most part. Let's take a look at how we are shaping up for the U.S. session. We have equity index futures pointed higher. This after 2 up days now for the S&P, a percentage of a gain yesterday, and that's after last week's series of pretty extreme drops for the S&P 500, which took it below 5,100. We're well back above that level now. NASDAQ 100 futures also pointed higher. Let's take a look at treasuries because we did have an auction that was pretty well received yesterday. A lot of appetite, but also a lot of supply this week, so we'll continue to watch those auctions. We had some movement, but we're back down to where we were pretty much before the auction. Risk off 4.9289. We have the VIX below 16 as well, and then Brent crude is holding on to those gains after we had a stockpiles report that suggested they're pretty hefty at the moment. Do stay with us. Plenty more ahead right here on Daybreak Middle East and Africa, including Sunil Kumar, the Spinneys CEO. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Middle East and Africa. Our top stories this morning. Asian stocks follow the tech-fueled rally on Wall Street as investors focus on earnings now as a major test of the equities bull run. Tesla surges post-market on its promise of making cheaper cars sooner. And the Senate passes a long-delayed $95 billion emergency aid package for Ukraine and other allies. Arms shipments to Kyiv expected to resume within days. It's just gone 8:30 a.m. across the Emirates. I'm Vonnie Quinn in Dubai, and let's see how we're shaping up. A lot more green on the screen this week than last week, I'll tell you. Yesterday, the S&P 500 in the US was up 1% following Monday's gains, and the Nasdaq 100 up 1.2%. Of course, it helps when the likes of Tesla comes in and says, well, you know, we're going to assuage your concerns, and then the stock rises 13% post-market. So today, we're looking at futures that are pointed higher for the Tuesday session. We're also looking at a 2-year yield that's not expressing any fears. There was plenty of appetite in yesterday's auction. Brent crude, though, holding on to gains. It's above $88 a barrel. The API came out and said that there was plenty of stockpiles, but maybe not as much as the market had anticipated, and so it's holding on to those gains. We are continuing to watch earnings very, very closely, though, for direction of the S&P 500. Let's take a look at this chart. It's been oversold. We know that. We saw 6 down sessions last week and the week before. Now it's just bounced off its 30 level. Will it continue to rise and stay bounced off that, or will it take a few sessions, a few goes at it before it does? We'll have to wait and see. Let's check now on how markets in Asia are faring. So far, so good. April Hong in our Singapore studio, right?
Yeah, we're seeing that green coming through in the Asian session, and this is against the backdrop of this week, as you know, Vonnie, being that key test of whether not just U.S. equities run up, but also Asia markets can continue powering through. So far, what we're hearing from the likes of Tesla, Texas Instruments, they're helping the EV and the chip-making related stocks in this part of the world. So we're seeing the moves to the upside on the Japanese, the Taiwan, South Korean gauges. Hong Kong also also well in the green. Let's take a closer look at what this is doing in the FX space, because this is providing a read-through that tech rally on the South Korean markets. That inflow is prompting the Korean won to outperform against the other Asian currencies today. We're keeping an eye on the Aussie as well, as we got a hot inflation print. We're seeing that surge there on the currency. The yen in focus as it hovers close to the 155 level, though if you talk to some of our MLive colleagues, they'll say they don't see intervention coming in soon. It's not just about the levels, it's really about the pace, the magnitude of the move so far. We're, of course, watching out for the BOJ. That meeting kicks off tomorrow, Vonnie.
We'll be here, April. That is April Hong in Singapore. Thank you so much. In a rare private sector listing for the UAE, supermarket chain Spinneys is going public. The high-end grocer is looking to raise $375 million with 900 million shares on offer. It's a test of investor appetite for privately owned companies looking to grow their businesses. And joining us now is the CEO of Spinneys, Sunil Kumar. So congratulations, Sunil, you're going public. What has demand been like so far?
Thank you very much, Yoni, for taking me. We have seen a great demand from investors, whether it is international investors or regional investors. So it shows the confidence on the business, what we have demonstrated so far in this region. At the same time, if you look at the economic activities of this region, also is a confidence level from the investors. So we have a great demand, what we have seen from both international as well as regional alike.
Yeah, you're very much a rarity in having an international cornerstone investor. Has that changed the calculus at all?
No, look, the important thing, the cornerstone investors have shown a great confidence. That's why the blue chip cornerstone investors are coming to invest into the business. And that shows the business, what the unique positioning of the brand and how we have demonstrated our growth profile as well as our financial performance, if you look at it. So it has given us a great confidence for investors, and that's why we have got a great two blue chip cornerstone investors into the business.
Sunil, regional investors have got used to the high dividend yields that you get in government IPOs. Are they looking past that with yours?
So this is a very rare private sector if you look at it in the recent history of listing in DFM. And Spinneys is a rare business. We have been here almost 63 years, and we have been serving part and parcel of the day-to-day life of our communities and customers. And we have demonstrated very strong performance. Our growth profile has been there. So it is a very rare opportunity for investors to look at a private company and going to listing in DFM. At the same time, it is a growth projection. If the growth potential, we are going to Saudi Arabia, we are going to have a vertical integrated model of business. At the same time, this is with a dividend payout as well. So it is a rare company looking for a growth potential for a future, at the same time with a dividend policy.
And indeed, you have huge ambitions for growth. We're going to get to some of those new markets in a moment. But I do want to ask you a little bit about the situation regarding what you stock. So you're obviously going to have to stock certain things in different environments. Have you thought about your Saudi Arabia plans, for example, and what you'll do about your pork offerings?
Look, Saudi Arabia is... Spinneys is a GCC brand. If you look at it, we are serving here 63 years. And if you look at Saudi Arabia, it is a very strategic country for us to operate, the brand to be visible, because of 36 million people, and we are going to Riyadh as a city. So what we have seen recently is the high resilient demand for the premium food in Saudi Arabia, and it's the right time for us to go. But look, we are giving an option, all the varieties of a food. It is not necessarily a specific food we have to cater. If I am not catering that specific food, will be successful or not. But we have 98% of the business is coming from the other categories. So the demand what we have seen for particularly in the meal solutions and our private label offering, we are 62% of our turnover is coming from fresh food. So we are a premium fresh food retailer. And I'm sure that Saudi market and customers will appreciate what we have done here.
And how does it work? Do you talk to Saudi authorities about that?
So we have a local partner who will navigate around finding the properties at the same time, looking at the governance and the other procedures requirement, because we are not in Saudi Arabia. So they will work for us to navigate around the challenges in case if we face it. So it is working in both ways.
And also your alcohol offerings, and that's more broad of a question, right, in different markets. Do you plan to expand on that?
No, we don't sell alcohol in UAE because it is a UAE and in Saudi. This particular region, unlike in Europe or in America, they don't allow supermarkets to sell alcohol. But it is not in our portfolio, so we are not thinking about an alcohol selling at
But it's available
time.
on your website, right?
It is in one of the businesses, and it's a different licensed businesses in in Abu Dhabi. It is they are selling alcohol, but it is not part of the retail supermarket
And there
business.
are no plans for
No, it is a vertically integrated businesses.
So talk to us a little bit about your plans for tapping equity markets, if there are any, to fuel some of this growth.
So we are looking at this is an opportunity for a company. This is the right time to invite investors to participate in the growth trajectory. Why it is an important for a private company like Spinneys? Because it will give us a strategic flexibility. At the same time, it is an opportunity for us to get a diversified portfolio of investors, and it will be giving us an access into capital market in case we wanted to grow further. You know, our ambitious plan is to be in part of the GCC and wider. That's as a part of it, we are going to Saudi Arabia first time. So our ambitious plan can be executed with the access to the capital market.
So give us numbers. How many stores are you hoping for, and by what date, and in how many Gulf countries?
We have 75 stores so far as of now, and it has given us an 8.2% like-for-like growth. And our ambitious plan for, first of all, we are going to Saudi Arabia. It is a market where we haven't been there. We are also generating a vertically integrated business model called the Kitchen by Spinneys. The concept of that to give a solution for customers, breakfast, lunch, dinner, consume now, consume later, take home. It's a food hall concept, considering all ethnicities, cuisine is demonstrated. So that store we are going to open in quarter H1, first store, and we have a plan to open 25 stores for the next 10 years. And thereafter, we are seeing a 10% growth on like over every year. So 24 will be growing at 10%. This is the objective, and this is what we are looking forward. But based on that, I guess the investors has shown a great demand for our IPO.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like it's going to be just a phenomenal event. The grocery business is notorious for thin margins, right? And I'm curious where you're seeing in the supply chain inflation problems maybe hit some of that. Obviously, there isn't an inflation problem in the Gulf right now, but there is in other parts of the world.
Very good question. Now, there are a couple of factors I wanted to highlight here, what makes us different. So Spinneys is a very unique business. 85% of the revenue is coming from food-related products. That means the customers see as a food business, and 62% of the business is fresh food. Now, we have a vertically integrated supply chain, which means we have an offices and across the globe. We are sourcing from 44 countries. And at the same time, this region doesn't have a production capability. So we have our own production capabilities from protein, bread, meal solutions, confectionery, and flowers. So we have that opportunities to create ourselves, and we have a private label which is called Spinneys Food. So all these, as well as the fresh food offering, has given us a very competitive margin. That makes us different than other competition.
Well, it also helps that the CEO is seen on the floor a few times a week, and particularly on Thursdays, right? Sunil still goes down to the floors in the grocery stores. Good luck with everything, and Sunil Kapoor, CEO of Spinneys, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Coming up, we speak to the Regional Director for Arab States at the United Nations Development Programme. It's a conversation you don't want to miss. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Middle East and Africa. I'm Bonnie Quinn in Dubai. Let's turn now to the conflict in the Middle East. As tensions with Iran ease for now, Israel is turning its focus back to Gaza and eliminating what it says is the last remaining stronghold of Hamas. That is reviving international concern about the fate of 1 million plus civilians in Rafah. Our next guest is Regional Director for Arab States at the United Nations Development Programme. Abdullah Al-Dardari joins us from Doha. Abdullah, first of all, can you give us the state of affairs in Gaza in terms of statistics? What is the extent of destruction and the possibility of famine?
Already the Palestinian economy, not just in Gaza, all of the Palestinian economy lost 25% of GDP. And it's expected to lose another up to 28% of GDP should the fighting continue for 3 more months. 70% of people in Gaza are in severe and very dangerous food insecurity situation. And 70% of the housing stock in Gaza has been destroyed, fully or partially. And we expect that 20 years of human development in Gaza have been wiped out already. That's almost a worth of $50 billion of investments in infrastructures, in housing, in health and education, water and sanitation, and all of these very precious investments that were presented by the Palestinians and by the international community. So one can say that the Palestinian economy in general has been put back decades, and human development in Palestine in general and in Gaza specifically has lost about 20 years.
Those talking statistics, are any services still available at the moment in Gaza? Is anyone working, or is it literally 100% unemployment?
Well, let me give you an idea about the municipalities in Gaza. We just surveyed 26 municipalities, and out of 1,036 staff of these municipalities, there is only 22 working today. So these municipalities served 800,000 people. So you can imagine that the loss of services is devastating, as you can see.
You know, pre-war, Gaza was dependent on things like the black economy, the tunnel economy. Is there a forecast for what kind of an economy Gaza will have post-war?
One of the things we are doing now, and we are talking to the Palestinian Authority about this and to the local communities in Gaza, is what type of economic vision Palestine and Gaza should have after this. I don't think we can go back to what used to be there. We need to have a new vision. We need to have a vision of a vibrant economy that employs the Palestinian young and provides decent jobs and dignified livelihood. So that's part of our work, and that's part of our thinking. How to break out of the vicious circle of the past, and how to make sure what we see today is not repeated.
Abdullah, you said something like 70% of buildings destroyed are residential, but there's a phenomenal amount of devastation and I presume an amount of debris to be removed. Give us an estimate for how long that would take. Who would do that, given that 50% of the population is at risk of famine and so presumably, aren't able to physically lift debris and presumably can't go back to places where there are no residences left?
Very good point. That's why we estimate that the debris so far is about 37 million tons of debris. Just to give you a comparison, in the 2014 mini war of 51 days, the total amount of debris was 1.4 million tons. So, therefore, it will take decades to manage and to sort out all this debris. In our plan for early recovery in Gaza, UNDP and the rest of the UN system will be working on the question of debris. We'll be hiring thousands and thousands of Palestinians to work with us on doing this. But as you said, we need humanitarian assistance so that they have the nourishment and the food necessary to give them the energy to do that work. And we also have to look at municipal services, at machinery, because all these municipalities have lost all the machineries they used to have, the trucks, the bulldozers. So it's a massive operation, And this is not on, we are not talking reconstruction yet. We are only talking about temporary shelter, dignified temporary shelters for about 1 million people, with all the health, education, water, sanitation, energy services that should be accompanying these shelters.
Abdullah, you mention Palestine quite frequently. Are the effects, though, confined to Gaza, the economic and socio-economic effects, or is the West Bank also impacted? And how are, to that point, other Arab areas and states helping here?
First of all, let me stress that when I said 25% of GDP lost, it's all of Palestine, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. So it shows you that even though the violence, the extreme violence is happening in Gaza, West Bank has been badly affected. The agricultural season has been ruined because farmers cannot go to their farms because of roadblocks and settler attacks and so on. The tourism season was completely destroyed. Banking is on the verge of the collapse. The non-performing loan ratio is increasing dramatically. Trade and trade finance have also been interrupted. So the whole Palestinian economy is at a standstill practically and receding years backwards. In our talks with the Arab region and governments, we have strong signals of support to this proposal that we have for early recovery in Gaza and in Palestine, India.
Yes. Abdullah, please do come back soon and give us an update. That is Abdullah Al-Dardari, who is the UNDP Regional Director for Arab States and also former Syrian Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs, and our appreciation. Plenty more still ahead. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Middle East and Africa. I'm Bonnie Quinn in Dubai. South Africa's Capitec Bank is the country's best performing stock since democracy was declared in 1994. CEO Harry Fui says that to keep momentum strong, the lender wants to grow its business banking and insurance units.
We believe for the next 5 years to focus on South Africa. Like I said, there's the business banking, there's insurance, there's how do you optimize 22 million clients? How do you create the ecosystem for 22 million clients? And then we've got Everfin that operates in Mexico, Spain, Czech, Poland, and Latvia. It's an online lending business. And how do you transform that into a bank over time? And how do you then take the Capitec brand that we've built, a digital platform, how do you take that international? So that's what we believe is the long-term plan with Everfin.
Joining me now is my colleague Jennifer Zapasata, who actually spoke with the Capitec CEO. So Jen, what's been the key to the bank's success?
Yeah, good morning, Vonnie. I mean, really what we heard there from Mr. Fourie has been the bank's ability to diversify. Like, as he said there, they have 22 million customers. They're the biggest bank in terms of customer base, but the third largest lender in the country. But he says really diversifying has been key, diversifying away from just their retail banking and focusing in then on business banking and also their insurance business. He talked a little bit there about the business banking. When we looked at the earnings yesterday, it brought in 478 million rand, in profit after tax in the year under review. And really they're looking to double down on that, especially when it comes to small businesses and the informal sector. And if, just to give you a little bit more context, I mean, you said there that the bank has been one of the best performing shares on the JSE since 2002. Just yesterday after these earnings, the stock jumped more than 9%. And we're also seeing Capitec shares surge more than 1,100. And so it's really positive news for the bank. But the key going forward is going to be whether or not they can really double down and hone in on this business banking unit, which is still relatively new for the bank.
Well, and of course, Jen, the South African election is fast approaching, as we've been seeing on Africa Amplified, all your interviews. But what was the CEO's view? How is it going to change things, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, Vani, this has really been the focus for this country here. We're just about 5 weeks away, and so we've been focusing really in on talking to the private sector about their sentiments leading up to this election that many people are saying is going to be one of the most important since democracy. Take a listen to what Mr. Fourie told us.
I think one will have to wait and see what happens because everyone is speculating. There's so many rumors. So many polls, you don't know what's really is going to happen. So let's see what happens. I think if there's a coalition, it's definitely going to slow things down because the coalition will have to be sorted out and new leadership will have to be elected. But yeah, let's focus, let's see what happens, and then we will manage it accordingly.
Harry Fourie there, and that was Bloomberg's Jennifer Sapasaja, and thank you so much. And she will be leading our special coverage of South Africa's elections. That's coming up on next Friday's Africa Amplified right here on Bloomberg TV. May 3rd. Tune in.